Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel and welcome to our London system series. So in this series we're following this very nice opening from White's perspective, and today I decided to do a special. I decided to show you one game played by the world champion Magnus Carlsen against another top grandmaster Wesley So. This game I'm showing you because I think this line that Wesley So played here can be really annoying, and this line can happen to us. I think Magnus Carlsen went out of the opening very well. Then Wesley So found really great counterattack possibilities, but I'm not going to reveal the result, what happened, but I think it's a very instructive chess game for those who have troubles maybe to play against the London system, but also for those who are playing the London system. This is, I think, a very instructive game, and because the problem about every opening is that we cannot learn every particular move that can happen to us. Our opponent can play sideline, and that's why these openings we should never learn just by heart. We should also be familiar with the common strategies, with common tactical ideas in the beginning, and then when we get out of the opening very well, then it's really time to show our middle game skills and end game skills. So opening preparation is good, but you shouldn't also rely just on your opening preparation. You should also, of course, improve your middle game strategies and, of course, your end game technique. So let's check out now the game. It was I played in 2017, although it was a blitz game, but I think it's a very instructive one, because we have seen now also Magnus Carlsen playing some bullet games without inaccuracies, mistakes or blunders. So this line, I think it's very important to know, also to be familiar with, because I think it can really happen to us. It's a very annoying line that Wesley So has played here. So d4 played by world champion Magnus Carlsen. We have knight to f6 by Wesley So, knight to f3, d5, bishop to f4. Now bishop to f5. We have mentioned this line already. This bishop to f5 idea, it is a little bit risky as you're weakening your b7 pawn. So that's why here Magnus plays the common e3. We have e6, a symmetrical setup, and now we have c4. The idea is clear. After maybe something like c6, we want to play here the move queen to b3. We have analyzed this line, and after something like queen to b6, we want to play c5, and then we will reach the main line of the Slav defense with the bishop to f5. So the London against the Slav defense with this bishop to f5 setup, which we have already analyzed in our London system series. So as I always like to say, please watch the series from the beginning, from the introduction video, part 1, part 2, and so on. So after the move c4, Wesley So plays now really aggressive line. Bishop takes b1. What you shouldn't do is to recapture here with the rook. The queen is simply much better, because we want to play here a queen and bishop battery and target also the weak h7 pawn. Now comes really this aggressive line. Bishop to b4. This forces now really white to not castle. You cannot castle in this game anymore. If you try to cover with knight to d2, then you get knight to e4, and it's already a losing game here for white, because you lose the knight, and that's why you have to play a really annoying move, king to d1, which Magnus Carlsen of course played. But don't be scared. It's of course a king in the center position, but it is playable, as we are trying something else here. We are trying the move bishop to d3, king to e2, and then rook to d1. We will castle sort of by hand, and that's why it is now in equal position for both sides, but I think it's playable here for white, although your king is a little bit stuck in the center. In the game, bishop to d6. This is now our normal idea of black. Black wants to undermine the pressure, wants to trade off more pieces, wants to go into a simplified line, because the king is still in the center, as I said, and by trading off more and more pieces, black could have a comfortable position. So that's why bishop to g5, played by Magnus Carlsen. He's not allowing here trades of bishops, h6, bishop to h4, and now knight from b to d7. We want to play much more freely with our queen. We want to play maybe something like c6, queen to a5, and still this knight would be protecting, so we are not risking some bishop takes f6 followed with g takes f6 ideas, because then the pawn structure in front of the king would be weakened. So c takes d5, played by Magnus, taking out the pawn, and of course you cannot take the knight with the knight. That's why e takes d5, and now bishop to d3. That's what I meant here. We want to play this move, bishop to d3, king to e2, and then rook to d1, supporting our d4 pawn. If something happens, then we could have also a sort of an indirect attack against the queen. So that's the file that we're searching for the rook. Or in some other occasions, we're trying maybe to play rook to c1, then we would have the rook on c1, the queen on b1, and the rook on a1, and we would create this so-called minority attack. And minority attack is an attack in which we are creating this 2 versus 3 situation. We're attacking with our 2 pawns against 3 pawns by black. What we want to do is, of course, provide some weaknesses, maybe a weak square, or maybe a targeting a new weak pawn in the position. So c6 played by Wesley So. If you try c5, it seems like a good idea, but here is the problem. D takes c5, knight to c5, and now comes our idea. If you take knight takes d3, basically you're inviting your opponent's queen into the game, and you see you always risk this isolated pawn situation. There are now tactical possibilities with bishop to f6, followed with queen to d5, not immediately, because after queen takes f6 also the b2 pawn would be hanging, but as a long-term plan, as I said, it could be, I think, playable. So that's why after bishop to d3 c6, here Wesley So tries to build really a compact position, and now Magnus plays king to e2, and we have now bishop to e7. Now comes b4. Now comes the preparation of the minority attack, and I hope you realize, although Magnus Carlsen's king is on a weird square on e2, it's really not a problem, because you cannot open the center immediately. You have to also secure your opponent, your king first. And that's the beauty of the bishop pair. Whenever we have the bishop pair, then we are searching for open positions. We want our opponent to open the position, so that's why black needs first to secure the king, and then afterwards maybe, just maybe, try to open the center. So a6, we have rook to c1. As I said, you see now how Magnus uses this semi-open file, the c file, the b file, and the a file, with this heavy artillery, with this rooks, with the queen. We have castling, and now a4. This minority attack is, the main goal is here to provoke some kind of weakness. Maybe after a potential b5, then maybe the b7 pawn could be a long-term weakness in black's position, with the bishop pair now on the board, with the king on a very good square. We still have opportunities, of course, to play king to f1 and secure the king further. So Magnus played here a risky line, but got out of it very, very easily. So knight to e4, we have bishop takes e4, and now bishop takes h4. If you try d takes e4, it's not a problem. We can take with the queen, and you have lost the pawn. After bishop takes h4, we have queen to h4 followed with knight to h4. So that's why Wesley So takes here the bishop first, and we have now bishop to h7, king to h8, and now bishop to f5. Here knight to b6. Wesley So finds really good ideas here, because he wants to target, of course, also the weak c4 pawn, c4 square. The c4 cannot be any more attacked by any pawn, so that's why Magnus would be forced to battle against this knight with potential bishop to d3 moves. So I think, as I said, Wesley So played here also a good game with the now knight outpost ideas. This bishop is still good. It can be remaneuvered here to f6 or e7, so the bishop still has a good activity. The rooks are on natural squares. The queen hasn't played so far in the game, but the black's queen will also find a way into the game. So I think, as I said, Wesley played here a good opening line. So b5, this is the main minority attack idea to provide some weaknesses. C takes b5, a takes b5, and now a5. If you try a takes b5, then it's basically game over, because you get rook to a8, and you cannot take with the queen, because the queen is a little bit overloaded to the defense here of the bishop on h4, so you would be forced to take with the knight. But now rook to c8 happens again. The queen will be deflected here after something like queen to e7. First we take rook takes f8 with the check. After queen takes f8, knight takes h4. So that's why here Wesley So realized his tactical problems on the a file and played the move a5. We have g3, kicking away the bishop, bishop to e7, and now king to f1, securing the king. A4, we have h4 here by Magnus, and now rook to a5, attacking now also the weak b5 pawn. So Magnus has advanced the pawn further, but now you see it becomes really his main weakness in the position. What Wesley So has here as a disadvantage is maybe also the weak b7 pawn. So it's really a battle, but if this game now suddenly goes into endgame, I think black could even be slightly better, because black has here this pass pawn, the supported pass pawn, and the bishop is aiming on this side. The knight is also on the queen side, so so far black has a perfect support. of the pawn and can try to push this pawn further. So h5 played by Magnus. We have knight to c4 and now bishop to d3, queen to d7 and now bishop to f5. Here, instead of this queen to d7, maybe here a3 is also an idea, because the problem is it's not so good to take here the knight, because after d takes c4, rook to c4, you get queen to d5. You're forced to play something like knight to d2, but here also there are some tactical threats with queen to h1. Here, this line, Wesley So, unfortunately for him, missed. He should have proceeded, I think, with the move a3, simply pushing further this very, very nice pawn. Very annoying, I think, this pawn would be in the continuation of the game. So that's why here queen to d7 maybe a slightly passive move by Wesley So, but also with a clear idea to attack simply the weak b5 pawn. In the game, bishop to f5 was played. Maybe now it was the best choice here for Magnus Carlsen to take simply the knight, because it's really an annoying knight. You don't want to have this knight through the whole game. In the game, bishop to f5 was played, and now we have queen to d6 by Wesley So. Maybe queen to e8 is slightly better after something like b6. Bishop to d6 can be played, but now king to g2, securing everything. And okay, maybe with queen to d8, still this pawn can be attacked, but again, you have also troubles to defend maybe somehow your d5 pawn. The queen will come into the game. We can also play something like queen to c2 or bishop to c2, attack maybe this pawn. So it's really a tough battle already in the game. Queen to d6 was played by Wesley So, which was maybe slightly inaccuracy. King to g2 played by Magnus, and now queen to b6. Bishop to d7. Protecting now finally everything, and we have now queen to d6 and Magnus plays queen to f5. Maybe again bishop to f5, simply retreating and try to do a perpetual, getting into a drawish line. After queen to f5, here bishop to f6. That's the move that Wesley So should have played, because if you try here to protect your bishop further, you have really some troubles to get out with your bishop here on d7. The bishop is really locked here. You don't have good activities, and now it's really time to get use of this diagonal. Also take finally out maybe this pawn, maybe try to push the pawn further with the move a3, a2, getting this knight somehow into the game. So it's, I think, maybe a slightly better here position for black. So in the game, Wesley So played the move knight to b6. In the game, bishop to c8 played by Magnus. If you take, it's not such a good choice, of course. You get some tactical threats here on the 8th rank. Here Magnus, after rook takes b5, Magnus takes also the pawn on b7. We have now rook to b2, we have rook to c6, attacking the queen, and now queen to b8. This was now the critical moment of the game, and it was a huge blunder by Wesley So, because again he missed some tactics. A better idea is simply to play knight to c4, and it's an equal game from this point on, because if Magnus takes, bishop takes d6, then knight takes e3 with a fork. We can simply take also the queen, and the rook has to move, but now we can regroup. I think in this particular position we can really make something happen, and I think it's a playable game here for both sides. But in the game, you see Wesley So played this risky queen to b8, and now Magnus Carlsen finds a way how to activate this bishop with bishop to a6, queen to a8, and now bishop to d3. It's now a forced checkmate. You see how Magnus Carlsen maneuvered this bishop all over the board. The bishop has been here on f5, on d7, on c8, then on a6, d3, and now the bishop and the queen are building this this very nice battery on light squares, and threaten, of course, checkmate here after the move g6, h6, g6, and in this position Wesley So resigned. Even if you try to block the position with f6, we can simply pass through with g7, king to g7, and again it's a checkmate. So okay, great game, I think, by both sides. Wesley So had some counter-attack possibilities, but I think it's a very important line that you should also notice in the London system. A very aggressive line with this idea to first take the bishop. Let's go back. So with this idea, bishop takes b1, queen to b1, and now bishop to b4. Black has really good opportunities in this line. Magnus went out very well, I think. Made then maybe some slight inaccuracies, but won the game eventually. And as I said, Magnus is really the master in the London system, I think we'll cover more and more of these games, but also more games of other top grandmasters. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. It was a great tactical battle in the London system. If you want to see more about this opening, check out my whole list of my whole playlist of the London system with some other sidelines and also some other openings. And if you have troubles maybe to play as black, check out my hyper accelerated Dragon Sicilian defense series and my Nimzo Indian and King's Indian series, in which I show you nice and effective ways how to play against d4 and e4. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.